Well, good morning. Good to see all of you here today. Thank you for coming. Thank you for making the time. My name is Gene Cowell. I'm the special agent in charge of the FBI's Omaha field office. With me today is Susan Lair, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Nebraska, and Major Jeff Roby with the Nebraska State Patrol. Beginning last night and early this morning, we conducted a large-scale arrest operation across this part of the state, and we arrested almost 30 individuals on federal and state drug trafficking and firearms charges. Our arrest teams apprehended subjects in Lincoln, Kearney, Ogallala, North Platte, McCook, Brule, Sutherland, and several other communities across the state. 19 of the individuals arrested are facing federal charges of possession, distribution, and conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine, as well as some weapons violations. 10 of the individuals arrested are facing state drug trafficking charges. Today's arrest wasn't something that just happened today. It's a culmination of a 2-year investigation by FBI Omaha, our North Platte resident agency, and our Code Task Force, many of whom are represented here today. The full-time members of the Code Task Force are Nebraska State Patrol, HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, North Platte Police Department, Lexington Police Department, the FBI, and then several other part-time agencies. Throughout the course of the investigation, we've made over 55 arrests, obtained over 34 federal indictments. Legal narcotics and firearms have also been seized throughout the course of the investigation. I can't go into too many details on the case. What I can tell you, though, and what I can emphasize, is the vital importance partnerships play in protecting our community from drug trafficking. And we're here today because of the work of our state and local partners. More than 150 police officers, sheriff's deputies, state troopers, and federal agents participated in the enforcement action today, and they represented over 20 law enforcement agencies here in Nebraska. I also want to emphasize that the trafficking of drugs and methamphetamine is not a victimless crime, which we all know. We all know meth is exceptionally destructive. Many of you are aware of the havoc it can wreak in our communities and neighborhoods. And I also want to emphasize that the use and distribution and trafficking of meth goes well beyond individual users. We all know drug dealing occurs in a black market of death and addiction, in deals that often are enforced by violence. And too often families and communities in Nebraska are affected by this. Too often children are affected by this. We all know that the violence and child abuse often accompanies drug trafficking and drug abuse. So our work continues. It is by no means finished. We'll continue to work with our partners to disrupt and dismantle significant drug trafficking operations throughout the state. We'll continue to work with our partners to impose consequences on those responsible for selling drugs to our mothers and our fathers, our sons and daughters who live here in our community and in our neighborhoods. And the way that we will do that is by continuing to work with all of our law enforcement partners across the state to leverage our task forces to bring federal charges and state charges against the most prolific traffickers, and tracing back the source of supply of these drugs to find out where they came from and impose risk and consequences on that source of supply. But of course, we can only do this with all of your help. We depend on the community's help. And we ask and encourage anyone out there, if you have information about drug trafficking in the state of Nebraska or anywhere, give us a call. You can give us a call at our office, or you can submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov. So thank you very much. I'd now like to introduce Susan Lair, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Nebraska.
Thanks, Gene. One point that I would like to emphasize is that, as you all know, the scourge of drugs is not just a big city problem. It affects communities like Brule, like North Platte, like Ogallala. And an operation of this magnitude emphasizes that whether it's the FBI, the Nebraska State Patrol, the 20 other law enforcement agencies that were involved in this operation are all dedicated to trying to clean up the communities involved in communities from Omaha to Scottsbluff. This was as Special Agent in Charge Cowell said, this was a state operation. It was led by the FBI and the Nebraska State Patrol. Not only the investigation, but just the operation that took place over the last 15 hours was incredibly well planned out. This was not something that just occurred overnight. This was in the works, the operation for weeks. It had the assistance of, in addition to all the other agencies, the Lincoln County Attorney's Office and the Keith County Attorney's Office, without whose assistance a number of these individuals would not have been arrested, and we would have problems bringing them to justice. So those are the agencies that had, in the county attorney's offices, that had direct involvement. We also had involvement or assistance from the Trident Task Force in Grand Island, from the Hall County Attorney's Office. Again, I cannot emphasize or overemphasize the statewide operation and cooperation of local, state, and federal entities. So thank you all very much. Continue to notify law enforcement, call in tips, call in suspicions. We want to clean up the communities within which we all live. So thank you very much.
Major?
Okay, I'll just reiterate the cooperation that it did take today between our federal partners here and the U.S. Attorney's Office. As you heard before, about 100 and some officers came in this morning to help with these arrests. That's not easily done. A lot of work went into that. One of the things I want to reiterate is our local task force here, working every day with our local partners in the sheriff's office and the PDs, and putting these cases together so that we can bring them to prosecution. So it really does make an impact, and it's that local connection that they have with the local law enforcement agencies, and also the people of western Nebraska, that's going to make an impact for years as this goes forward. The investigations, as you heard, aren't totally complete at this time. We'll have other information that we learned today from these arrests that we'll take and work with our local communities here, and hopefully get more of these methamphetamine traffickers off the communities here. So on that, I'll turn it back over to Gene for any questions.
Major, thank you. I'm happy to take any questions to the extent that we can. Yes, sir.
Ryan Herzog from the North Platte Telegraph.
Hey, Ryan.
Who in North Platte was arrested?
So we will not release the names at this point, but Susan, if you'd like to talk more about the plan to.
So there's still, we have officers and agents that are still out looking for some of the people who have been charged in state court and indicted. Later on this afternoon, we will send out a written press release of the people and their names who have been charged and who have been arrested. If they haven't been arrested yet, we can't release their names.
Where's most of this meth coming from?
Sure. Well, we don't want to discuss too much about this case in particular, but in general, in America, a majority of the meth is coming from Mexico, where it's produced by cartels at a very, very high level, very high purity, and trafficked into the U.S. So in general, that's how the flow of meth comes into the U.S. I don't want to say anything particular about this case yet. Sir.
Can you speak to maybe the quantities in a transaction or anything like that that you were getting in the investigation?
It's a great question. We're not going to speak to any details yet of this. Eventually, whether through the press release or I think when indictments as they come sealed, there might be more details there. We're not going to speak to any of that right now, but it's a great question. Thank you. I would say that there's a wide range from small amounts to large amounts.
Did you find any fentanyl traffickers? You mentioned meth, I didn't hear fentanyl.
Okay. I don't want to get any more details other than what will be released in the press release and in the indictments, and then you'll see the charges and the drugs involved.
Gene, Tristan Winder, KNOP, Great Television Group. Are these individuals being lodged in their local detention centers for the time being then?
They are being lodged in local detention centers across the state currently.
I have a follow-up question, but I can't remember what it was.
That should be all time.
What are the ages range? The ages ranging of the people?
That's a great question. There's a wide range, and that will be released when the more information about the subjects are released.
A lot of these communities, if not all of them, are along Interstate 80. So how do we continue to address the unfortunate pipeline that is Interstate 80 with some of these unfortunate things?
Well, I think the way we do that is exactly what we've shown today. It's the partnerships. It's nothing the FBI can do by ourselves. It's working together with Nebraska State Patrol, all the sheriff's departments and police departments along the way to share intelligence, to work together to combat this problem. And this problem is bigger than any one agency. As you see from the arrest today, we were hitting locations all across this part of the state. So it's nothing one agency can do. And the way we address the problem, as you described it, by continuing to work together, to share intelligence, and to really impose risk and consequences on those traffickers who are bringing drugs into our state. And that's part of why we're holding this press conference today, to let people know that we are doing this. We take this seriously. If you call us with information about drug trafficking in the state, we'll work together, we'll share that intelligence. No agency is going to hold on to that. We're going to work together, find the best agency or task force to leverage that information and disrupt or dismantle the enterprise responsible.
So you're talking about cooperation with other agencies. What agencies out of state were involved?
Well, in this press conference, just wanted to really highlight the great work of Nebraska law enforcement and the federal agencies, from the FBI to HSI. Of course, we always work with other states and other agencies, but in terms of the indictment, as you'll see it in the subject been arrested, really great partnerships here in Nebraska. But to your point, we continue to exchange information, intelligence across borders, right? I mean, nothing's going to stop at the border. If we have information about drug trafficking that leaves Nebraska, or source of supply of drugs, or targets who might be in other states, we will not waste any time to reach out to whatever local, state, federal agency can best act on that information. Sir?
What does CODE stand for?
It stands for the Cooperative Operation for Drug Enforcement.
And also, was there any particular name for this special enforcement operation? Any kind of code name or?
We do have a name we use internally. It's not a name though we use externally.
Am I correct in understanding that most of these arrests were in central and western Nebraska?
Eastern, central, and western, I think, because I know there are arrests made in Lincoln.
Okay.
So I guess I would say eastern, central, and western. Is that
Across Nebraska?
Yeah, across Nebraska. Not the entire state, but a good span
Okay.
of at least 3 major regions of the state.
Okay.
You spoke to some extent about placing tips. Can you talk about anybody that might place tips, how that they can do so anonymously and not be at risk of any sort of repercussions, rather it be with law enforcement or with the individuals they're making the accusations against?
Of course. So if you, at least from the FBI perspective, if you call us or go to our website of tips.fbi.gov, you can submit those tips anonymously. What we can also say is that we take very seriously protecting how we get information. It's one of our highest priorities in how we conduct investigations, and we'll take whatever safeguards we need to protect those people. On the state and local level, there's many different avenues, from Crime Stoppers, many communities have, and I don't know, Major, if Nebraska State Patrol has anything particular you have to get tips in that you'd like to talk about, or?
I'll let Lieutenant Arnold come up and you can give that information there.
So for local, yes, obviously for here in North Platte, we have Lincoln County Crime Stoppers will go into the North Platte Police Department. And then for the Nebraska State Patrol, the Nebraska State Patrol has a Crime Stoppers link on our homepage too. Then that'll come to the State Patrol. They'll figure out geographically which area it needs to go to, and they'll disseminate it accordingly.
Can you give us a little idea of why investigations like these take time span of about 2 years?
Sure, every investigation is different, but I think what's important to know is that what we're trying to do, and what these task forces, these federal state partnerships bring together, is what we call the enterprise theory of investigation. We're trying to go after an enterprise. We're trying to find the source of supply. We're trying to go after the most prolific traffickers. To do that takes time. It takes time of investigation, identifying who those people are, collecting evidence, working with the prosecutor's office, the attorney's office, and the state prosecutors to get the legal process we need. So 2 years doesn't mean 2 years of sort of waiting. It means 2 years of really quite a bit of activity to identify these subjects. Things don't work like TV. There's no magic board where every subject just appears. That's really what the hard work of the police officers and the sheriff's deputies and the agents and the troopers are doing every day here, is trying to follow whatever source of information they can, identify who that person is, what's the criminal activity, collecting the evidence, documenting that, and finding who else in the enterprise is someone that we should try to target to help protect the community. And that just takes time.
Is there,
Go ahead.
is there a time frame on when some of these cases might start the judicial process?
The first individuals some individuals will have their initial appearance or arraignment starting tomorrow. So I would say within the next 48 hours, those that have been arrested will appear before a judge.
And then that process could last potentially years, right?
It depends. In the state system, somebody has a right to, their speedy trial right is a right to have their case disposed of either by trial or plea within 6 months. In the federal system, it's 70 days. But any motions by the parties can delay that time or stall that time. So if a defendant wants more time to speak with their attorney, if the attorney needs more time to review the discovery or the reports in the matter, that can delay time. So those can all factor into the amount of time.
This large-scale operation, what is the benefit of this large-scale operation to attack the meth distribution versus some smaller local operations?
Sure, happy to address that. I think it's a great question. In law enforcement, there's room for both approaches. You need both approaches, right? You can't ignore low-level criminal activity to only target the higher-level criminal activity. But if you only focus on the low-level criminal activity, you're never really going after, in this case, the main drug distributors. So there's room for both. And that's why these task forces work so well. Because we have officers and sheriff's deputies, especially, who really know what's going on in the community. And they might know about a small case, but the task force together, leveraging sort of federal resources, can take that small case, maybe that tidbit of information or evidence, and make that into a bigger case. But we believe, especially on the federal side, that the way a major component of reducing crime, reducing drug trafficking, is going after sort of the major and the most prolific dealers. But of course, we can only do that working with state and local partners. You know, we can't just start at the top. So it's a hybrid approach.
I've got a micro and a macro question. So,
Okay.
on the micro level, what time did you start with these arrests this morning?
Some arrests were made last night. Majority started early this morning, before the sun came.
Before sunup?
Before sun.
And then, can you speak a little bit about how disruptive this might be to the meth trade and corridors? And
Our hope, which is why we build these cases, our hope is that this will significantly reduce the supply of methamphetamine and other drugs into this part of Nebraska and really the entire state. We've seen that success in other kinds of cases. We hope that will be replicated here. As I've said, this is not the end, this is just the beginning. We also know that if there's a void in drug supply, due to the nature and disease of addiction, people will move in to try to fill that void. And we want to be well positioned to anyone who tries to move in to fill the void, which will be created with this very successful arrest operation. We're ready to target those individuals and keep the supply of these drugs significantly diminished in our state. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming out, and really appreciate it. And as the U.S. Attorney has said, later today or tomorrow there'll be a press release with significantly more details about the individuals charged. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.